In this video, I'm going to show you how I coded the game Tic Tac Toe using the ncurses library. The first thing you're going to do is type this on the command line to install the ncurses functions. So this is my main function, and it's really short because we're just going to call functions that we've defined in a separate file. So at the top here, this void init curses function, that's just a standard function we're going to have to include every time we want to initialize ncurses. So here I used a drawboard function to make a static grid that's going to be totally independent of the gameplay. Now, the default cursor position is at the upper left corner, and the important thing to remember is that all these move functions are taking the y coordinate first and an x coordinate second. So this block of code is going to draw vertical lines. The first argument is the y coordinate that we're going to manipulate with this for loop. The second is the x coordinate, which we've fixed, and the third is the character that we wish to add at that position. So since the origin is in the upper left corner, we have to make y positive in order to go down. Now as we're incrementing through this for loop, this if statement is going to print horizontal lines at y positions of 2, 4, and 6. So later when we play the game, when a user hits the spacebar and enters either an X or an O, that's going to be stored as a 1 or a 0. So since we want to start the game with a fresh game board, we're going to use this function to fill the array with values that are greater than 1 or 0. So most of the game actually belongs to this play game function. What we do is we initialize the board to our non-1 and 0 values, then we move to the position y equals 8, x equals 0, and make a message for player 1. Then we have to move back to what I've defined as the origin in terms of the tic-tac-toe grid. Then we have to refresh our changes so that they appear. So back in main, most of our function calls were within a do while keep playing was equal to 3. This block of code just lets us know that if our number of moves counter ever reaches 9, we need to restart the game since there's a tie. So this is where ncurses is really useful for interpreting the arrow key input. And there's just essentially some defensive code here that prevents the user from going out of bounds when they're moving around the grid. So this is the code for what happens when it's player 1's turn and he's pressing the space bar, so he's trying to move. So what we're going to do is use getYX to get the coordinates from which he hit the space bar, and then we're going to check and see if that's a valid move, i.e. if we're not trying to overwrite someone else's guess. So update board data is going to go and check the board data just to make sure that there isn't a 1 or 0 already being stored there. So if it's a valid move, we're going to place our X character there, and then we're going to call our check win function, which is at the bottom, and it's going to look for all possible winning scenarios. So if after player 1's move there's a winning scenario, we're going to respond with feedback, and if he didn't win, then we're going to increment the number of moves so that we can use that to determine ties later. So if player 1 didn't win, we're going to signal player 2's turn, and then the code for player 2 is almost identical to the code for player 1. So this is the update board data function that we called previously. And what it does is it takes the board data as a pointer, it takes the x and y coordinates from where the user tried to input, and it takes a 1 representing player 1 trying to place an x, or it takes a 0 representing player 2 placing an O. And all we're doing is that we're calling the 0th element of the array the upper left corner, and we're going to call the 8th element of the array the bottom right corner. So if the element that we're interested in already contains a 1 or a 0, that means that either player 1 or player 2 has placed their marker there, which means that we can't move. So it'll just keep waiting until we try and place our marker in a vacant position. So this is the function we call every time someone places a character. It just compares the contents of the array against each of the 8 possible winning scenarios.
Thank you.